The cream-colored envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I could bring myself to open it. I knew what it was. The elegant calligraphy spelling out my name gave it away. Sarah's wedding invitation? My sister was getting married, and somehow I was dreading it more than celebrating it. When I finally tore open the seal, my hands were actually shaking. The invitation was everything I expected from Sarah. Pristine, expensive, perfect, gold embossing, silk ribbon, the works. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison and James Michael Crawford request the honor of your presence. I had to read it twice before the reality sank in. My little sister was really doing this, but it wasn't joy I felt looking at those beautiful words. It was this heavy, complicated knot in my stomach that I'd grown too familiar with over the years. The same feeling I got every time our family gathered. Every time I had to watch Sarah shine while I somehow became invisible in the background. I set the invitation down and stared at it, remembering when we used to play wedding dress up as kids. Back then, we'd take turns being the bride, giggling as we draped Mom's old curtains over our heads. Sarah always looked more natural in the role, even at 7 years old. She had this grace about her, this way of making everything look effortless and beautiful. Now here she was, living out that childhood dream, and I was sitting in my apartment wondering if I even wanted to go. The invitation felt less like a celebration and more like a reminder of everything that had gone wrong between us. But family is family, right? Even when it hurts, even when you know walking into that room will feel like stepping into a minefield of old wounds and unspoken resentments. I had no idea how right I was about that minefield. Growing up, Sarah and I were like two different species living in the same house. She was the golden child, literally golden, with her perfect blonde hair that never seemed to get messy, even after a full day of playing. I was the one with unruly brown curls that Mom could never quite tame, no matter how much product she used, but it went deeper than appearances. Sarah had this natural ability to be exactly what our parents wanted. She brought home straight A's without breaking a sweat, while I struggled to maintain B's despite studying twice as hard. She played piano beautifully, her fingers dancing across the keys like she was born for it. When I tried to learn guitar, Dad complained about the noise and asked if I could practice somewhere else. Sarah dated the quarterback, became homecoming queen, got into her dream college with a partial scholarship. I chose a state school for my journalism degree, which Mom described to her friends as practical, and we all knew that wasn't a compliment in our house. When Sarah announced she was engaged to James, a successful investment banker, the family practically threw a parade. When I got promoted to senior investigative reporter last year, Mom's response was, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Sarah might make partner at her firm?" The pattern was so ingrained that I'd stopped expecting anything different. Family dinners became performances where Sarah starred and I played supporting cast. Holiday photos were arranged with Sarah front and center, me slightly off to the side. Even our childhood bedrooms told the story. Hers was redecorated 3 times to match her evolving tastes, while mine stayed frozen in time with the same purple walls from middle school. I'd learned to build my life outside their approval, carving out success in my career and surrounding myself with friends who valued my sharp wit and determination. But there's something about family that can reduce you to your 12-year-old self in seconds, making you feel small and inadequate no matter how far you've come. Looking at that wedding invitation, I felt that familiar ache of being the outsider looking in. The phone call came 2 days after I'd RSVP'd yes to the wedding. Mom's voice had that particular tone she used when she was about to deliver bad news while pretending it was perfectly reasonable. "Honey, we need to talk about the wedding," she began, and my stomach immediately dropped. "Sarah's been thinking, and well, we all have, and we feel it might be best if you didn't attend the ceremony itself." I actually laughed, thinking she was joking. "What do you mean, didn't attend? It's her wedding, Mom. I'm her sister. You can come to the reception," she continued, as if she hadn't just suggested I skip my own sister's wedding ceremony. "It's just that Sarah wants everything to be perfect, and you know how you can be sometimes. A little intense. She's worried you might say something or cause a scene." The words hit me like a physical blow. Cause a scene? When have I ever caused a scene at a family event? Well, there was Christmas when you brought up that article about corporate tax evasion right in front of James's father, and Thanksgiving when you questioned why Sarah needed such an expensive engagement ring. You have opinions about everything, and Sarah just wants one day where she doesn't have to worry about conflict. I sat there in stunned silence, processing what my mother had just said. They were uninviting me from my sister's wedding because I had opinions, because I asked questions, because I wasn't content to smile and nod and pretend everything was perfect all all the time, so let me get this straight, I said slowly. I can come celebrate after the important part is over, but I'm not welcome to witness my sister actually getting married. Don't be dramatic, dear. It's just easier this way. Easier for whom, I wondered. Certainly not for me, sitting there realizing my own family saw me as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. 3 weeks before the wedding, I was working late on an investigation into financial fraud at several investment firms when James Crawford's name appeared in my research. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Crawford isn't exactly an uncommon surname, but when I cross-referenced the details, my blood ran cold. It was definitely him, Sarah's perfect fiancé, the golden boy who'd swept her off her feet with expensive dinners and weekend getaways to the Hamptons, the man my parents gushed about at every opportunity, calling him such a catch and exactly what Sarah deserves. The documents spread across my desk told a very different story. James had been quietly moved between firms twice in the past 3 years, always just before internal investigations concluded. There were whispers of client funds being misappropriated, of elderly investors being talked into high-risk schemes they didn't understand. Nothing had stuck legally. He was too smart for that, always covering his tracks just well enough to avoid criminal charges. But the pattern was unmistakable. James Crawford was a predator in an expensive suit, and he'd found his next mark in my trusting, naive sister. I sat back in my chair, staring at the evidence, feeling sick to my stomach. This was exactly the kind of story I'd built my career on, exposing people who use their positions to take advantage of others. But this wasn't just any story. This was my sister's fiancé. This was the man she was planning to spend her life with. My hands shook as I printed out the most damning documents. Sarah deserved to know the truth, but I could already imagine how this would go. She'd accuse me of jealousy, of trying to sabotage her happiness. My parents would rally around her, painting me as the bitter sister who couldn't stand to see Sarah succeed. But what if I said nothing? What if I let her marry this man knowing what I knew? Could I live with myself watching her trust someone who'd already proven he couldn't be trusted with other people's lives and money? The wedding was in 3 weeks, and I was holding a bomb that would either save my sister or destroy what was left of our relationship forever. I called Sarah the next morning, my heart pounding as I listened to the phone ring. When she answered, her voice was bright and cheerful, probably thinking I was calling to gush about wedding details. "Sarah, we need to talk. It's about James." The silence stretched between us before she responded, her tone immediately guarded. "What about James?" I took a deep breath and dove in. "I've been working on an investigation and his name came up. Sarah, there are things about his past you need to know. Financial irregularities, client complaints, a pattern of—" "Stop." Her voice was ice cold. "Just stop right there. Sarah, please, just listen to me. I have documents, evidence that shows—" "Evidence of what? That my fiancé is successful? That he makes good money? God, I should have seen this coming." Her laugh was bitter and sharp. "You can't stand it, can you? You can't stand that I'm happy, that I found someone amazing, that my life is working out perfectly. This isn't about jealousy." I practically shouted into the phone. "This is about protecting you from someone who what? Who loves me, who treats me like a queen, who's everything you'll never have." Each word was like a slap. "You've always been jealous of me, but this is a new low, even for you. Sarah, I'm begging you. Just look at these documents. I don't want to see your fake documents or whatever lies you've cooked up. You know what? Mom was right. You are going to ruin my wedding." Her voice cracked with emotion. "Well, congratulations. You're officially uninvited. From everything. The ceremony, the reception, all of it." "Sarah, wait." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the documents still scattered across my desk, feeling like I'd just watched my sister walk off a cliff while refusing the rope I'd thrown her. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with angry texts from my parents, making it clear that I was now persona non grata in my own family. The silence in my apartment felt deafening after that phone call. I sat on my couch, staring at the wedding invitation that was now essentially worthless paper, and let the reality wash over me. My own sister had just cut me out of her life, and my parents had chosen sides without even hearing mine. For the first time in years, I cried. Not the angry tears I'd shed over family disappointments before, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs for the relationship I'd just lost. Sarah and I hadn't been close in years, but she was still my sister. Despite everything, I'd always held on to this naive hope that someday we'd find our way back to each other. But as the tears dried, something else began to take their place. A cold, clear determination that I recognized from my best investigative work. They could exile me, they could paint me as the jealous sister, but they couldn't change the facts. James Crawford was dangerous, and Sarah was walking into a trap. I picked up the documents from my coffee table where I'd thrown them in frustration. The evidence was solid, damning, and completely ignored. My family had chosen to shoot the messenger rather than hear the message, but that didn't make the message any less true. If they wouldn't listen to me as Sarah Sarah's sister, maybe they'd listen to me as a journalist. I had 3 weeks until the wedding, 3 weeks to build an airtight case that even my family couldn't dismiss. Sarah might hate me for it, but I wasn't going to let her marry a predator without a fight. I threw myself into the investigation with the intensity of someone whose life depended on it. Because in a way it did. This wasn't just about exposing James anymore. It was about proving that I wasn't the bitter, jealous sister they'd painted me as. It was about saving Sarah from a man who would destroy her life. My editor, Marcus, noticed the change in me immediately. "You're working this Crawford case like it's personal," he said, finding me at my desk at midnight for the third night in a row. "It is personal," I admitted, and told him everything. Marcus had been my mentor for 5 years, and he knew my work better than anyone. When I finished explaining, he leaned back in his chair and whistled low. "This is either going to be the story of your career or the end of your relationship with your family. My family already ended that relationship," I said, turning back to my computer screen. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. I found a former colleague of James's who agreed to speak off the record about suspicious trades that had cost elderly clients their retirement savings. I tracked down a woman in Chicago whose grandmother had lost her house after James convinced her to invest in a guaranteed scheme that collapsed within months. Each interview made my stomach turn, but it also strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about wedding drama anymore. This was about a pattern of financial abuse that had been going on for years, with James always managing to slip away before facing consequences. The breakthrough came when I connected with a forensic accountant who'd worked on one of the internal investigations. She couldn't give me official documents, but she could confirm what I'd already suspected. James Crawford was a sophisticated con artist who specialized in targeting vulnerable people with money. "He's good," she told me over coffee. "Really good. He knows exactly how to stay just this side of criminal charges while destroying people's lives." As I compiled everything into a comprehensive file, I realized I had enough evidence to not only stop the wedding but potentially put James behind bars where he belonged. The wedding was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a perfect Saturday in June. I wasn't invited, but I was there anyway, sitting in my car across from the church at 1:30, watching guests arrive in their designer outfits and expensive cars. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I saw my parents walk up the steps, my mother resplendent in navy blue, my father looking distinguished in his best suit. I wasn't there to crash the wedding. I was there because my source at the FBI had called me that morning with news that changed everything. "We're moving on Crawford today," Agent Martinez had told me. "Your investigation gave us the final pieces we needed. We've been building a case for months, but your evidence about the Chicago victims was the smoking gun. The arrest warrant had been issued an hour ago. James Crawford was about to be taken into custody for wire fraud, elder abuse, and money laundering. The timing wasn't coincidental. They'd waited until the wedding day to ensure he'd be exactly where they expected him to be." At 1:45, 3 black SUVs pulled up to the church. I watched as federal agents in dark suits walked purposefully toward the entrance, and my heart started racing. This was really happening. The chaos that followed was visible even from across the street. Guests began streaming out of the church, some looking confused, others clearly upset. I could see people on their phones, probably calling family members to explain why the wedding had suddenly stopped. Then I saw Sarah. She appeared in the doorway in her stunning white dress, but instead of the radiant bride she should have been, she looked devastated and lost. My mother was beside her, trying to shield her from the growing crowd of onlookers and photographers who'd somehow already arrived. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Crawford's in custody. Full confession. Your story breaks tomorrow." I sat there watching my sister's world collapse, feeling a complicated mix of vindication and heartbreak. I'd been right about James, but being right felt hollow when I saw Sarah's face. She looked so small standing there in her wedding dress, surrounded by the ruins of what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Part of me wanted to go to her, to be the sister she needed in that moment, but I knew I was probably the last person she wanted to see. The story broke the next morning with my byline front and center. "Investment banker arrested at own wedding in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme." Within hours, it was picked up by every major news outlet in the country. James Crawford's mugshot was plastered across television screens, a stark contrast to the polished professional headshots that had once graced his firm's website. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. With the evidence I'd gathered and the FBI's investigation, James's defense team had little room to maneuver. The forensic accountant I'd interviewed became a key witness, and the victims I'd tracked down finally had their day in court. 3 months later, I sat in the courtroom as the judge delivered the sentence: 12 years in federal prison and full restitution to his victims. James, who had once carried himself with such arrogant confidence, looked broken and defeated in his orange jumpsuit. But the real victory wasn't just the prison sentence. It was the phone call I received received from Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman in Chicago whose life savings James had stolen. Because of your investigation, I'm getting my money back, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I thought I'd lost everything. I thought I'd have to sell my home. You gave me my life back. That call was worth more than any family reconciliation could have been. I'd done what journalists are supposed to do. I'd given voice to the voiceless and held the powerful accountable. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family had banished me for trying to protect Sarah, calling me jealous and vindictive. But in the end, my jealousy had saved not just my sister from a lifetime of financial and emotional abuse, but dozens of other victims who would have fallen prey to James's schemes. Sometimes being right is its own reward, even when it comes at a personal cost. Sometimes the last laugh isn't about revenge, it's about justice. 6 months after the wedding that never was, Sarah called me. Her voice was quiet, different from the confident tone I'd grown up hearing. I owe you an apology, she said simply. A big one. We met for coffee at a neutral cafe downtown. Sarah looked older somehow, more grounded. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with long pauses and careful words. She told me about the therapy she'd started, about learning to recognize the manipulation tactics James had used on her, about finally understanding why I'd tried so desperately to warn her. I was so caught up in having the perfect life that I couldn't see what was right in front of me, she admitted. And I was horrible to you. You were trying to protect me and I made you the villain. Our relationship didn't magically heal overnight. Trust once broken takes time to rebuild. But we started small. Occasional coffee dates, careful conversations about safe topics, slowly learning to see each other as adults rather than the roles we'd played as children. My parents took longer to come around, but eventually they did. The public vindication of my investigation made it impossible for them to maintain their narrative about my jealousy and troublemaking. I learned something valuable through all of this. Sometimes protecting yourself means standing alone, even when it hurts. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything you thought you wanted. But integrity isn't negotiable, and self-respect isn't something you can compromise away for the sake of keeping peace. The truth has a way of surfacing, and when it does, you want to be on the right side of it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful revenge stories. And if you've ever faced betrayal or family drama, feel free to share your story in the comments, because your voice matters here.